Welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Tara Reade, and this is the Politics of Survival. And I'm joining you, yes, again, from Moscow, Russia. So to all my friends in the West, hello. How are you? I'm doing good. I'm doing great. I hope you've been watching some of my posts about Moscow and what a beautiful and efficient city it is, and a very gentle and peace-loving people here, despite the Western propaganda and what it says. So I'm here with my producer, Reef, and we have a special guest we're going to introduce you in a moment. But first, I wanted to go over one of our independent news network members who also does the graphics and does the beautiful graphics for us. Greg did an article and did a lot of research on it and put it up. And it's about the Kranzensteins who work for Democrats, they're operatives, whether they work for money or they work because they're, I don't know, a little bit off. I'm not sure, but whatever the reasons, they've been basically pretty negatively stalking and terrorizing my family to the point where I made law enforcement reports and had to take some safety measures. Well, Greg saw them interrupt my spaces and really kind of try to hijack it. So he put together an article, and Reef has it up here for you all to see, that basically breaks down
I think that's what it is. Yep.
but it's really good. And you know, Indy's done a lot talking about the labor unions. So it was a tongue-in-cheek title, but basically he's been doing a lot of work and a lot of focus on some of the strikes that have been happening all over the country of workers trying to get livable wages and livable conditions. And so, Reef, when can we find this new show of Indy's?
Thursdays, 9 p.m. Eastern. Should be
Very
when that's
cool.
going.
And then you have a show that you
Yep.
do with Colin.
Yep. Every Wednesdays,
Mhm.
in 9 p.m. Eastern. So,
And
check it out.
so that's great. So people need to check that out. We have a lot going on. I just did a show with Savvy Sab, so you can check that out. I was on TNT Radio. Speaking of TNT Radio, I am joining their family. I'm doing co-hosting a podcast with Chris Ems, who is another person who sought asylum in Moscow, Russia. He's one of the OGs of crypto, and he was jailed in Saudi Arabia. He's on the FBI most wanted list, but he's a really good guy and a really sweet man. The only thing he did was he brought some information about crypto to North Korea and was invited to a conference. And because he was at that conference, the FBI and the United States went after him. And he's from Great Britain. But even though he was from Great Britain, they tried to extradite him. And that's how he ended up in Saudi jail. He was taking a flight and the American government tried to jail him. Rada Sterling, who is my attorney, was also his attorney, got him out. And he is now in asylum in Moscow, Russia, thriving, doing well. And he has a show called The Inquisition. And I'm going to be a co-host with him starting next week on TNT. And that will be, I think, about 10 p.m. Eastern time for like an hour. And we'll be talking about geopolitical issues and some of the things that are happening in the world. So Chris Ems is a really great guy, and we'll talk more about his story when he's on next week. But this week, I have someone who's very dear to my heart and who just spiritually uplifts me every time I'm in his presence. I feel the energy rise, and he is a director, he's a producer, he's been a stuntman in his career in Hollywood, a very successful person who had a show on Gaia called Interviews with Extra-Dimensionals. He was also a producer of the citizen hearings that happened on Capitol Hill, that documentary that was actually, they were filmed a few years ago. Senator Mike Gravel, I was a huge fan of his, was one of the people there, but everyone on Capitol Hill was. And we're going to parse out some things that are going on right now with UFOs and with extra dimensionals. And is it a distraction, or is it the real thing finally being revealed. So here I have Reuben Langdon, my friend, to help us sort through it. Welcome, Reuben.
Hey Tara, it's great to be here. Good to see you. I'm glad you're doing well and safe, and been sort of following your story in real time as it's been unfolding. And what an adventure, huh? That's you're
Yes.
going through it.
There's a Chinese
you're in the crosshairs,
saying.
as we were saying.
Yeah. There's a Chinese saying, and it's a blessing and it's a curse, and it says, "May you have an interesting life." So I think it's interesting that it's used both ways.
Yes. That is yes, you are definitely owning that Chinese proverb for sure.
Yes, in both ways. And I'm actually really, though, Reuben, I'm coming from a place of joy. I'm really discovering, I'm on a new adventure. I'm in the East as opposed to the West, and I'm discovering a whole new way of thinking and living. And it's a beautiful experience, I have to say. So to all the haters out there, no, I'm not a traitor. I love humanity, and I'm not into borders. And I'm very lucky that the Russian government chose to give me sanctuary and safety, and that's a beautiful thing. And we should all be so lucky to have people around us. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're going about it with the right attitude, to have this new culture, this new, new adventures, and interacting with new people and different people. So hats off. I think that's the best attitude to have.
Spasiba. And I'm learning a new language, which is
That's right.
the Cyrillic alphabet, and learning Russian. And it's a challenge, but it's also really fun. I do have adventures when I order things, because like food or whatever by myself, unattended, half the time I get things that I order, and then half the time it's mystery stuff. So
part of the adventure.
Yes, and you traveled a great deal too. But let's get into your story. So right now, Reuben, you last time I talked to you, you were working on some documentary stuff. I know that you've done a lot with living off grid with your wife. You've done a lot with spiritual matters, and also with your interviews with Extra-Dimensionals. And now we're watching unfold these hearings in real time, congressional hearings, amongst other things, about UFOs, and they call them non-biological beings. Or what do they call them?
Non-biologics. Yeah. That was sort of the term sort of thrown around at the hearing, this most recent hearing on Wednesday.
So enlighten us a little bit. What's your take on all this?
Well, as you were saying, is it a distraction, or is there some legitimacy to it? I actually did a poll on my Twitter, and it looks like the Twitter crowd, they're quite hip on, all of the latest psyops and things. So 50% of the of that group said it was a distraction. 16 said it was legit, and then 33 said it was both. So I did put the both marker in there just to see where people were falling. I fall in the both category. It is a very important topic that has been, secret. Our government, the U.S. government, and other governments around the world have been keeping this secret since the 1940s, maybe even earlier. But we have records showing for sure since the 1940s that this topic, in a sense, has been shrouded in deep secrecy from the Roswell crash, which is sort of the most famous one we've all heard about. But there have been many, and the reverse engineering. We can go back into the Nazi Bellcraft and other types of connections with sort of extra-dimensionals to gather an edge and get technology to have power over adversaries, right? So this has been a big part of the Cold War. Actually, was around between U.S. and Russia, was around the UFO subject and secrecy in that, and who's got what technology and that kind of thing. It wasn't just about nuclear arms and weapons. So so that's coming out now, and this hearing is sort of setting the stage so we can have the open conversation and not get the typical ridicule and laughing that usually happens when you even bring up the topic. It is a very serious topic, and now hopefully, I think the positive side of this is about that we can have the conversation that people. I was on a Twitter space last night, and there was a ton of people just coming forward, sort of for the first time about they saw a thing or they had an experience or they actually interacted with an ET, but they didn't know how they could explain it or talk about it or that kind of thing. So this is the positive side of this, is we can start to have these conversations like we are right now. But there is obviously some very auspicious things around the timing and about some of the players in the audience that we saw there on the hearings. Personally, I think I think Burchett, Representative Burchett and Luna, who were sort of spearheading this hearing, and as well as the witnesses, I think they're all legit. I think they're trying to do their best. And yeah, pointing the fingers, but yes, there was some shadiness behind the scenes, perhaps.
Yeah, Reeve, show that piece you just showed, because Reuben, you sent that piece to me. Describe to our audience what we're seeing there. What's your take on that?
Well, it's basically we have the most sort of questionable character in this is James Clapper, with the Obama administration and heavy intelligence guy. He was caught lying under oath and didn't really get punished or anything happened to him. So I think just by his track record, as well as the people he's been around with the Clinton administration, he's a questionable character. And I'm not sure if my fellow researchers like George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell are good friends. I'm not sure if they're aware of that, and I don't even know if some of the witnesses who are testifying are aware of some of the backgrounds of some of these people. So I know it's sort of easy to say, oh, it's all a psyop, but you have to understand. There's the people who are coming forward to testify, like the David Fravers, are people who've had, they're credible people who have been in the military. They've had extraordinary experiences, and they're wanting to share what they've experienced, and they're doing it in this public forum. Grush, he's also he's a questionable character, but I feel his testimony is accurate, what he is able to say, right? And there does seem to be a push-pull of these intelligence things going behind the scenes, as Burchett and Luna were trying to get a SCIF meeting after the fact, which he said, I'll tell you in the SCIF, but they're being blocked.
What did that mean? What did that mean for the audience that doesn't know? What's a SCIF meeting? What are they talking about?
So SCIFs are, for Congress members and classified meetings. People go into these sort of special rooms where they're in a Faraday cage, so electronics cannot pierce in or go out. Signals can't come in and out. They're not allowed to use any electronics. They're supposed to leave all their electronics outside the door, and they're sort of checked for all that, so nothing can hear in and sort of get here into that classified information. So Congress is supposed to be able to have those types of conversations with intelligence community people and military people, but for whatever reasons they're even blocking. And who's they, right? Who are these people? I don't know. They've just say Burchett and Luna are saying, we're being blocked from having a SCIF. So so that means that there's some other interference with gathering information and questioning Grush, and over half of Grush's testimony was, I'll tell you in the SCIF. I'll tell you in the SCIF. I can't comment exactly on that, right? So and he's being careful. There's these new laws that are coming forward to protect whistleblowers. However, there are many whistleblowers that forget about the NDAs and have come forward. Dr. Stephen Greer has been bringing a lot of those people forward. The fact that those people aren't testifying is a little strange. there is a lot of high strangeness around just this topic in general.
Great.
But then all the characters and the different motives and different things. It was the other sort of obvious questioning and answering and direction that they were trying to carry the narrative was in this sort of fear-based narrative of where we don't know what they are, they could cause harm. Grush even made this pause of like, me and my wife saw stuff and it's dangerous and that kind of thing. And then later in the same setting, he was asked if he said, well, I've never seen any craft, I've never seen anything personally, all my information is from sort of secondhand testimony or credible people that he's interviewed over the years and stuff. So there is some contradictory there. And then you have to ask, why are they pushing this fear narrative? And obviously, the most obvious reason would be to get more funding for the military-industrial complex. I was just going
to say that. And Reeve, could you post up that article I asked before the show, the Space Force? That brings us to Space Force, what you just said. Now, I thought I heard 40 billion, but this article cites 30 billion. I think more has been put in since then, but 30 billion towards Space Force, which nobody knows what it is. And as you know, Reuben, because we've had discussions about this, the Pentagon doesn't get audited. And when it does get audited, it flunks it. It's flunked their audits 8 times. So this kind of goes into, not to, a pun here, but it goes into a black hole, like a space black hole, the Space Force. So
lots of black holes in Washington for sure.
Yeah, right. So do you think that some of these hearings is around trying to drum up more money for Space Force? Or I hear what you're saying, that these are legitimate people. This has been going on for decades, these conversations. And it's been so hard to get it forward to the public. Even with the FOIAs and with the release of information. And you produced actually that hearing, the citizen hearing. Right. Could you talk a little bit about what made you want to do that and how you feel now that you're watching the real thing happen?
Yeah. Well, the first part, yes. I mean, this is definitely there's no doubt about it that it's a ploy to get more money for the military machine. That is a heavy hand that's being played here in this whole thing. But again, that's one aspect of this. The other aspect, I think we'll get into a little bit later, but there's a lot of positivity just having this conversation around this secret stuff that that's, I think, the bigger picture, which we'll go into. But yes, going back to the citizen hearing. So yes, in 2013, I had my own experiences in 2007. I was convinced something's going on here. I started going down the rabbit hole and,
take a second. Tell the audience about that who may not have seen our first interview. What was your experience? Yeah.
So in 2007, I, had a daytime sighting. Several craft showed up in the sky for about 45 minutes. And it was as most people who've had sort of these out of this world type experiences, it's a game changer in how you perceive the world. You don't really think about it in your day-to-day life, and you go about it as like, okay, yeah, whatever. At least for me, maybe it's real, maybe it's not. I don't know. I don't care. I'm a stuntman. I was working on Avatar at the time.
Yeah.
Playing an alien, right? So literally, ironically, and then and then had this experience. And I couldn't shake it off. I couldn't shake off what had happened, and is this real? And why isn't anybody talking about it? What's up there? So I started going down these rabbit holes, and discovering Stephen Greer and the Disclosure Project and all the work that he's been doing over the decades. He's been doing a lot of good work getting the word out on this subject. And then eventually signed up for one of his CE5 contact events, where we go under the stars and sort of do a meditation and call them in. And 3 nights in a row, more ships showed up. sort of sealed the deal for me that this because I still was like, maybe I was hallucinating that day. I don't know. So you know, I wasn't on drugs or anything, but it was just like, you don't know. You still question it. And then
Right.
and then after interviewing more people and going down so many rabbit holes and really understanding what's going on here with the cover up, it became this passion of mine to get this word out. Like I thought, I was still naive at the time. I didn't understand the government cover up was so deep and so maniacal and just the means that you know, they literally will kill people for talking about this stuff. This was especially back then, not now, obviously, but even in the 2010, there were researchers that were getting taken out if they got too close to some of the truths. And so, but I kind of was just like, I didn't buy into all that. I was still like, we'll do this event. The public, the press will get a hold of this, and then it'll be disclosure. Everybody will know. And then it was during the production of the event and calling in the press. We did it at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. Has a lot of notoriety, and just a few blocks from the White House. And for 5 days, for about 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day on some days, we had a collection of over 32 hours of testimony from several witnesses, 6 former members of Congress. So it was a mock congressional hearing that we set up to we were trying to push, it was an advocacy move to sort of push disclosure or push the media to take the subject seriously, push Congress to take it seriously. And it did, to a certain extent, it did a lot of good, but I was blown away at how much it was shunned and shamed by the media, and how Congress didn't take action on it. That sort of blew my mind, even though we had Senator Gravel and many other fine congressmen and women on the panel. It sort of showed me really how locked in this whole secrecy and how the media is in sort of cahoots with a lot of these groups. And now we know after the fact, in fact, what do we, just like today, right, or yesterday, we get the Facebook, Facebook and Instagram were censoring the Facebook files, right? That we get the first bit of that's coming through. We know about the Twitter files, but now we have proof that Facebook has been censoring. And this is on the social media side, but just imagine on the mainstream media side how censored and controlled it's been, since probably the beginning of the media. Who knows? Right. So anyways, at that time, it was, I sort of went into recluse because it drained me with all my money, my company. I lost my company. I lost a ton of money, my investors' money, and I got nothing but ridicule and hard times, as you're aware of that, how that goes, right?
So sorry, Reuben. I know it's tough times. Yeah.
Well, it was actually, I go in retrospect, I'm like, it was actually the best thing that ever happened to me, because I did start my inner journey, going deeper. I was already sort of a spiritual guy doing martial arts, and meditating and that kind of thing. But I really went deeper with my inner journey. And then that's when I started my other show, Interview with E.D, Extra-Dimensionals, and started communicating directly with these ETs, and getting the insights and the knowledge and the sort of new operating system on how to see the world through a different lens and not get caught up in all of the external noise that we're still working through right now as a collective. So so that was sort of that journey. And we're seeing things unfold in this way and fashion, and I'm still sort of keeping apprised of the news cycles and these types of things. And that's more, I try to have a very neutral, not so charged when I see it, even though it can be very charged. You just look at all the crazy news, especially of late, and you're just like, what is the world going? What's going on here?
But especially when you know someone in the news, right?
Especially when you know exactly someone in the news.
You're like, what? Yeah.
But the bigger message, that comes through my interactions is, humanity is going through a major upgrade in its evolution collectively. Individually, we're all doing our work, but collectively, we're sort of purging all of this this negative energy, this stuff that's been sort of holding humanity back from its evolution for a long time. For we can go really far back, but really since the 1940s, since this UFO cover-up, there's been Dr. Steven Gruder calls it the lost century, with the suppression of technologies and the suppression of information, and we're sort of coming out of that now. And I think Lisa Royale, who's been on my show, she talks about the beach ball. It's like taking a beach ball and trying to hold it underwater, and you need a bunch of people to do it because it's big and awkward, and you're sort of doing it, and you can only do it for so long, and then eventually people get fatigued, and then what happens is, instead of it just coming to the surface, it shoots out of the water. So this rubber band effect. So I think if the positive thing we have to look forward to is humanity has been suppressed in its evolution through the technologies, through the secrecies, through religion and mind control kind of stuff in that sense. So we're going to break through that, and we're going to go really fast, really far, and that's what's exciting. That's sort of why I'm like, okay, all this stuff is just temporary. We're just working through we're going through a collective purge, so to say. If you've been through any kind of plant medicine ceremonies, you go through the purge, and then you get the clarity afterwards. So I think we're purging right now. It's kind of nasty and dirty, but we'll get there.
Well, what's interesting about what you're saying is the perspective, right, of the revelations that we're getting about how much cover up there was and these possibilities. And one thing that kind of came to my mind several times is how in this point in history, we're closer to nuclear war and nuclear annihilation than we've ever been to World War III. And I personally, and I know people around me, feel a lot of impetus to really have conversations around what we're doing as a humanity with these weapons and all the enrichment that the weapons manufacturers get and the politicians. And one thing that struck me about this, and it might be, to some people listening, they might think this is wacky, but this is kind of something I was thinking, is that, if there were a future generations that were trying to warn the generations before, and that's part of extra-dimensional, because we know time is not the way we perceive it necessarily. And there was a way to harness that back. Maybe it's our great-great-grandchildren coming to tell us too. So some of these sightings might be us in the future if we made it, or us telling us, whatever. So that's one thing.
Absolutely. That comes up in my show a lot, that we have sort of future versions of ourselves. Many of these ET races are sort of offshoot timelines where they've gone through their evolution, going through, genetically modifying their DNA and that kind of thing in order to survive. And they've realized that was a major mistake. So they're coming back to warn us and to also take genetic material to sort of reboot their own race, because they've gone down such a dark path of genetically modifying themselves almost out of existence, that they, with technology, and sort of losing their spiritual and emotional connection to each other and to the world, to Earth.
Because we are at a pivotal moment. AI technology is about to change everything, right? That's what part of the strike is. Like, I'm sure you're watching the strike in Hollywood, which is the first time that both writers and actors are in 40 years have been striking at once. And there's part of the thing that they're striking about is the AI. Writers are worried about AI. I mean, so this is all kind of tied in, isn't it? AI and weapons technology and all of it. We're at this point in history, right? And so I think it's natural that we have these hearings. I wanted to do one thing. Reeve, do you have that brief clip? And then I wanted Reuben to give some feedback from the hearing.
Yes, I do.
Okay, thanks. Just if you don't mind, let's just watch this. I wasn't thinking that one. She's kind of annoys me. I don't know what it is about her. It's the one.
This one, maybe?
One. Yeah, let's do that one.
Do you believe UAPs pose a potential threat to our national security?
Yes, and here's why. The technology that we faced was far superior than anything that we had, and you could put that anywhere. If you had one, you captured one, you reverse engineered it, you got it to work, you're talking something that can go into space, go someplace, drop down in a matter of seconds, do whatever it wants, and leave, and there's nothing we can do about it. Nothing.
Do you believe UAPs pose a potential threat to our national security?
Yes.
It looped.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, stop it there. Go ahead. There's the fear base. What's your?
That's
what's your-
it. That that is it. And and I understand coming from a military perspective. You want to eliminate as many unknowns as possible. So
Right.
having that viewpoint, you're at a disadvantage if you are technically not up to speed for what your so-called adversary or the other person or whatever. So you always want to have that edge, and that's sort of why America's been leading in the world when it comes to its military might, is because it's had quite a bit of reverse engineered technology that it's been able to harness and use, and that's been trickled down through Colonel Corso, and in the 90s came out and was telling everybody about that. But but if you go back to just logic, and get rid of the military mind for a second here, and just think about, okay, if you have a being of that's able to traverse space and time and come here at any time they want and come and go as they please and sort of dance and make circles around our military, and they have been doing this for a long time. If you look at history, and if you look at the which I'm sure David Fravor now, maybe at the time he didn't, but I'm sure now he's been read in on a lot of different cases, the Phoenix Lights case in '97, Roswell, et cetera. We have lots of cases to reference. So if you look at that body of evidence and not just hyper focus on one single event, then you can kind of say, okay, well, these beings, even if you say, I don't know who they are and all that, you're just coming at it from your military perspective. These beings have been coming and going. They haven't taken us out. They haven't destroyed humanity. They, in fact, there's been some nuke tampering, but mostly just that comes along with, they turn it off. They have activated some. They've turned them on to sort of scare people as well. Robert Salas, who was at the citizen hearing, and he talks about his event there that happened in the 1960s, and actually I think the missile silos were activated. They were turned on, and but clearly they weren't launched or anything like that. But later, what you don't see in the news is Bob Salas talks about his contactee experiences. So he was actually contacted, him and his wife, in their bed, and were told about the dangers of nuclear weapons and how we should not be playing with matches and we need to be more responsible. So this idea of them being a threat is sort of absurd, because we would have been already taken out. And this idea, what I think what Grush is alluding to and not talking about, and Burchett sort of brought up in his questioning, was around radiation. So it was sort of framed, there have been injuries, there have been soldiers and scientists and people who are near these craft and phenomenon who do have some adverse effects, and it was sort of danced around and sort of presented that bad stuff happens. We've been attacked by these ETs. Well, as far as I know, in my research, I think I've heard of one, and I don't have definitive dates and times of this case, but I've heard that we've fired upon them, and most of the time they just ignore it and they go away. But I think there has been a retaliation in one case where, and again, I don't have specifics, so I really shouldn't even quote that. But
that's okay.
The collective body of evidence that we have overwhelmingly shows that they are not a threat, and that
It's almost like they're looking at us like we're children. In other words, you and I have talked about this before. about humanity, we're technologically maybe developed, but there's a lack of emotional intelligence. So,
Yeah.
and it doesn't mean that we're ignorant. It just means that there's a lack of development with emotional intelligence. It's not caught
Yeah.
up to where the technology is. So do you
Well,
think they do us with that compassion?
Well, yeah,
Or-
I mean, look at our state of affairs. Look at what's happening with Ukraine and Russia. Look at the U.S., instigating, pushing NATO onto on that whole situation. We're instigating
World War
wars.
III, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're our leaders, so-called world leaders, are in a constant pushing of war and violence, and in your case, manipulation and lack of transparency. There's just a lot of issues that we have within our current political and social structures of how we operate as human beings. So all of that needs to sort of get cleaned up, and before we can have real conversations. Just imagine there's a whole different side of this where religious groups are all calling these beings demons, and that they're entrained to think that they are evil, and they're going to suck our blood and take over humanity.
Some, but Marjorie Taylor Greene came out with a statement the other day where they could be angels.
Right. So progress.
Interesting, kind of different. Oh, I like your cup, by the way. That looks like a Moscow Mule cup.
I did get it from Russia. It is a copper cup. Russians still drink from copper cups, which is actually has tons of health benefits. So I'm glad you noticed.
I have it. Provost. Okay, so back to go ahead.
yeah. So there is we're going to have to change how we. This is the biggest part. This is the biggest positive side, I think, of having this hearings. Is so many people are going to by decree, not decree, but by default, they're going to have to adjust their worldview. They're going to have to just like me. And when I had my experience in 2007, I had my experience and I had to start shifting how I perceive the world. And there's a lot of awesome things that come along with that. It's very disruptive to your sort of basic operating system, how you've been operating for, if you've subscribed to a certain religion or belief or whatever it is, for your whole life, it is disruptive, and it can be, game changing, life changing in even in, it may in the moment be perceived as negative because your whole world's getting twisted and turned around. But on a bigger, wider view, you're now able to see things clearer in a more objective state. I don't know. Just having a different perspective on anything, I think, is a good, healthy thing to do. And now collective humanity, especially people who subscribe to government as being the be all end all voice of how to operate, which most of us are sort of beyond that at this point, but there's still a few people that still trust their government. They now that they're getting this information in that way, then hopefully this will start to open their minds, start to have conversations, and then eventually lead us into the next stage, which is open contact. And how long is that going to take us? I don't know, but we'll get there.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is, and I don't know, like in your research, what you've discovered, but I wonder if there isn't a lot of compassion for. It's almost like we're young children, like humans, because in universe time, we haven't been around very long. And I mean, there might be compassion for our developmental state. And perhaps there's an opportunity with contact to get innovation, ways of thinking, accelerated maturity, and accelerated ways to use energy and to use all kinds of technology to make our lives more full and easier. It's interesting that those conversations don't happen at these hearings, don't you think?
Yes, yes. I'm sure behind the scenes they are happening, and and that has sort of been the consensus. If you watch the citizen hearing, all the researchers that have been in this field for the Richard Dolans and the Linda Moulton Howells and the Stephen Greers, and they've all the late great Stan Freeman, the all of their they all come to the same conclusion, is that the reason the cover up is continuing as long as it has is basically to keep us entrapped in this energy paradigm. Because as soon as we announce that ETs are real, then everybody has to start questioning, or how are they getting here and there, and there's no heat signatures. That was brought up during the hearings. The David Fravor talked about the heat signatures and from the craft and stuff. So what it does is it's allowing humanity to start having the conversation in a public forum that there's something else moving these things around than our traditional propulsion systems. So that's a big win for even though they didn't really have that conversation publicly,
Right.
but it's a big win for humanity to start getting out of this old idea of how we consume and create energy. So that's what's most exciting for me.
Yeah, and considering how oppressive the Biden administration has been about information, suppressing it, it surprised me that these hearings took place. But then, as we were just discussing, there was a distraction, right? It's a distraction from some other corruption hearings that are happening about the Bidens.
Sure.
It's a big distraction, actually, because people were very interested in it. I know a member of my family got a hold of me and was like, "Wow, are you seeing the UFO stuff?" I'm like, "Yeah, are you watching the Hunter Biden stuff?" Like, you know what I mean? Right? Are you watching the fact that there's bribery and corruption and it's all around Ukraine? But yeah, so it does. I mean, I guess my question to you is, are they just using this in this moment of time to distract, or do you think this is going to propel a bigger conversation? Is this the beginning, or is it just sort of a little blip? What is your opinion on that?
Well, I think this is the beginning, but I also think so that there are, again, this whole military industrial complex of different groups. It's not all just one group. Now that, the Biden administration sort of has the talking piece, so to say, or they're in power. It doesn't necessarily mean they're fully in power, as we've seen. It's the Supreme Court sort of do thing, and in the Hunter case, the judge is sort of, being a little, not being so submissive, so to say, pushing back a little bit. So there's different forces at play here. And for the longest time, if we go back to the Rockefeller Initiative, Lawrence Rockefeller was trying to sort of in the 90s blow the whistle on the UFO subject by talking amongst his people and colleagues during the Bill Clinton's administration, and was bringing Bill and Hillary in to private meetings, and Dr. Stephen Greer was there as well, about sort of getting the message out. And then everybody around him was like, no, we don't need to do that. Let's take it easy here. And so what the Clintons, ever since they've sort of gotten wind of this, and this ties into the Epsteins and everything else, is there's been a sort of a separate group that hasn't had access to this information. Even John Podesta has talked about, his phone calls that he's been denied access. And that's probably a good thing, especially when you're talking about that group.
Podesta, yeah, definitely.
So there's groups within groups, right? Within
there's factions, right?
There's factions that are trying to get technology so they can have an upper hand. So when they're doing their evil bidding, whatever that is, right, that they have some sort of edge over the other guys. And then there's other factions that are, trying to protect it. And then there's, part of that is, we're still going to keep the secret from humanity, because there's still people that believe that humanity can't handle the truth, so to say, so that. So there's a lot of dynamics in this, and it's not so cut it's not so, black and white, cut dry type of
Mhm.
situation. There's a lot of and I'm not clear on all the groups and people, and I'm talking with different people and hearing different things, and I think it's a very messy world when it comes to the UFO subject matter, and everybody's trying to get their hands on it, on the technology. That seems to be the biggest power grab, what everybody wants.
Well, I would
but
imagine there needs to be balance.
it does need
I
to be
think that's the
balanced,
most important thing.
and I think our ET friends are helping keep the balance to a certain extent. And I think one of the reasons this is coming out now, obviously the it's a pure benefit to keep the news cycles distracted from all of it. I have a list here. There's so many things happening in the world right now.
Right.
The Hunter Biden thing being a big one as well. But there is sort of chatter behind the scenes that perhaps the ETs might show their hands in a more public situation. Maybe a bigger Phoenix Lights type event that's sort of undeniable. And if that's the case, some of the people in power keeping these secrets, wanting to get ahead of the narrative a little bit, and get, some may think that panic may ensue, or they might lose the grip of control if these things start showing up. And as sort of a test run for that was this whole balloon, we're shooting down UFOs over Canada. Justin Trudeau comes in and says, we got the guys, we got the UFOs, we shot them down. And then will show us the proof. Oh, well, it disappeared. We don't know what's going on there. And ultimately we find out that a lot of it was Chinese balloons and stuff. But the Chinese
were quite annoyed, by the way. Yeah.
What's that?
Chinese were quite annoyed, by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So and a lot of that too is to provoke wars and to do these types of other narratives. So there is a lot of war games, so to say, happening behind the scenes, and different chess pieces being moved around, and that sort of unknown is working, I think, to humanity's advantage. This ET unknown. What are they going to do? Are they going to stop a nuclear threat? Are they going to and that's what I've heard, is that's any sort of major world devastating type of nuclear event. I don't think just from the chatter that I've heard from the ETs, that they wouldn't allow that to happen. On a smaller scale, they would. If we get another Chernobyl or Hiroshima type event, then they would probably not intervene. So we're not sort of in the clear in any way, but as far as a world devastating event, I don't think I think we have help in that sense. But it is, we are right there. We're right at this the buttons are being pushed as far as these insane moves by our politicians. And the more Americans, the biggest thing we can do is to educate ourselves and just say no, as an individual, even though we don't think we have power. The more we're just doing these types of conversations and just educating the people on just the insanity of what's happening here, then we can hopefully avoid any type of major conflict.
Exactly. You know what? And that brings me to one other question, but before I get to that, Reef, are there some questions for Reuben, or comments to share? Okay.
I'd like to know what you think the best fictional depiction of ETs have been in the last, I don't know.
Oh, interesting question. So go Reuben. What do you think? And you worked in Hollywood, so you kind of have an insider.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's truth in all of it, right? I think that's why we watch the Hollywood films and we get sort of moved emotionally, is because there is this some sort of connection, whatever that is. It's in our DNA, perhaps. But I'm a big fan of Star Trek. just this idea that humanity can get to this place where it's traversing the stars and seeking out new life. What an awesome concept. I don't think all these Klingon wars and these types of things aren't probably, I think that's a projection of what's happening here on Earth. But who knows? Maybe there are warring civilizations, and either way, just to go out and see that and to explore that, and especially the newer Star Treks, the Strange New Worlds and Discovery, they're a nice homage to the original Star Trek with all the new special effects and stuff. Shows like movies like Arrival, I think were really compelling. Contact, those are more sort of in our current time frame. What could happen if we get a mass ET sighting, or First Contact, when ETs, how would they show up for us? And Contact was a great exploration into that idea. But yeah, I think just going down to my list of favorite movies and stuff. I think that's clearly Avatar, working on Avatar. But well, there's a ton.
I had a question about some of the specifics in the hearing, and were also brought up in the citizen hearing that you did regarding the crashes. Mm-hmm. So what is your take on what happened, like in Roswell or other places, and what the actual cover-up is, and what they found that they just don't want to release? What is your take on that?
Well, since the 47 crash in Roswell, which is sort of the iconic one that several movies have been made, and several whistleblowers have come forward. Over 300 witnesses have come forward to talk about their experiences, and they all sort of collaborate the same event. So when you have that many people, deathbed testimonies and things, it's pretty clear that event happened. And the material was taken and reverse engineered. And in Colonel Corso's book, he talks about how and during that time is there was a lot of stuff that the military scientists took and did certain things, but a lot of it they didn't really have a use for. They didn't know what to do with it, so they gave it out to GE and Texas Instruments and other sort of technology developers at the time, and said, this is they didn't tell them where it came from. They just said, this is some stuff that we're working on, and if you just keep us involved with your developments, here's some free tech, and just let us know how you're developing it and give us sort of access to that, and here you go. So that's sort of how this technology has, with fiber optics and circuit boards and all of this stuff has sort of been peppered into a society over the years, making us think that it was a natural development from something that humans created, but it's sort of a hybrid of technologies in a sense. And then clearly the military has been doing their thing behind the scenes, continuously developing the craft. I think going back to your question of why did they crash, again, this is sort of the consensus through all the researchers, is when we started playing with matches, nuclear bombs, then that sent off a signal throughout the universe to different races to say, hey, the kids are playing with matches. If we don't intervene, some bad things could happen to this beautiful planet of life, lots of different types of life. And that it's been, through my interactions, Earth has been sort of this experiment of not just the humans, but that we have so much diverse life on this planet that other ETs have sort of peppered or gently guided some of the evolutionary paths of some of these species, and they have an investment with their energy and time here. And when we start blowing things up, we're sort of messing up their investment.
Okay. Yeah.
So they come here, and and they realize that we're sort of the dominant species on the surface here, and we have our ways of thinking and our military and that type of thing. So this is one of the theories that's been proposed, and I sort of subscribe to, is if you have a very offensive race or beings that have weapons of mass destruction, and if you just show up and want to shake their hand, just like David Fravor was saying in the hearings, we need to have the technical advantage. They're a threat. If anything has superior technology over us, immediately, in their mind, this is a threat. We need to have the upper hand. So these beings, knowing that, perhaps they sent in some vehicles to sort of stage a crash, in order for us to have more empathy on the beings, the hurt beings and these types of things, and the technology, and then we can engage in a dialogue in that way, as opposed to them just showing up and saying, hey, we're here to hang out, and we want to help you guys with what you got going on there. And a lot of people, especially in these political structures, who are used to having control and dominance over their people, so they are definitely going to perceive these beings as a threat that are coming here to say, hey, there's better ways of doing things, decentralization, free energy, you don't have to have these totalitarian, hierarchical structure class systems. And so for them to show up in that way, in a crash type of environment, then maybe they can get a little closer and start having the dialogue, and that type of thing. So that's one of the theories that I sort of subscribe to. But there's a lot of others. People throw out again that they're here to hurt us, and I don't think that's the case. And also, it was also said, well, if they can traverse, stars and go in and out of dimensions, why would they crash? And sort of that's a valid point. Why would they crash unless they are trying to make contact? And many of the other things that were not mentioned in the hearings were, this phenomenon has been going on for centuries, for eons, and much of the retrieved, not much, but a few of the retrieved so-called crash retrieval has probably could have happened centuries ago in different parts of the world, and sort of like an archaeological site, they're excavating and finding craft and technology still intact, and going after that.
Interesting. And so Reef, do you have some more questions or comments for Reuben?
Really, everyone's just kind of in support.
Okay, cool. All right, so
it's a lot to chew on.
Yeah, that is, and again, I kind of want to come back to time, because I just think that in this moment, in this pivotal moment in history, there are things that humanity can do to try to avoid calamity, if you will. Or, it might not be permanent, but it could last generations, the harm that could be done, right?
Absolutely.
It could really take things back a bit. And it doesn't have to happen that way, right? So things could change. So when it comes to reverse engineering, and when it comes to some of the technology, do you think that time is also part of that equation, as far as the information that's being shared right now about how to harness that? Because one of the challenges is, of course, going from one place to another without aging and those kinds of things, but also just on Earth itself and what we're going through. What's your thought about not just energy being harnessed, but time itself?
Yeah, that's a big topic of my show, and we talk about how sort of this jump in evolution in our consciousness, a big aspect of that, going, the terminologies that are used in my show are going from third density to fourth density, and in this sort of fourth density reality, we're used to dimensions. This is different than dimensions. Sort of, everybody says we're in the third dimension. We're actually in the fourth. Space-time being that fourth factor of the fourth dimension. Einstein and others, say we're in there's the fourth dimensional reality, and when you start messing with that space-time aspect, then you start traversing into like fifth dimensional kind of things, the Tesseract and these other things that we have in movies like Interstellar. That was what I should have said earlier too, the movie Interstellar. So time, and it was interesting during the hearings, wasn't really mentioned, but once they introduced into the evidence a paper, that declassified paper on sort of space-time physics and dynamics. And I'm wondering, we were sort of having a Twitter space talk yesterday about the reasonings for that. It wasn't never brought up later. But I think, as humanity evolves, our understanding of time is shifting. And this fourth density reality, time is no longer linear as we perceive it. And we are constantly thinking that we are sort of victims of our past. The past determines the future. And when we start understanding these new sort of space-time physics, we realize that all that exists is now, and that the past actually changes with the vibrational frequencies of where we're sort of vibing at now. And we can change our past and we can change our future depending on how we exist now. And I know that's a big concept for a lot of people to sort of grasp, but over time, I think we will get more clarity on this, and we'll understand the fluidness of time. And this is, again, during the hearings, it was sort of brought into David Grush brought into the vernacular of extra dimensionals or interdimensionals, as opposed to ETs. I think one of the Congress people had asked, why are you using those terms? And this comes down to the same reason why I called my show Extra Dimensionals, is because when we start to really understand how space-time physics works, it's going to, and I'm not claiming I do at all, but I'm just saying, as collectively, as we get smarter people on this that can understand this stuff, we'll start to figure out that that this whole time we've got this whole time thing wrong. All these years we've sort of been thinking about time in the wrong way, and these extraterrestrials that we perceive as beings from other planets aren't necessarily from other planets, but from other times. And you mentioned earlier with our future versions ourselves, different timelines, different branches, and all of those fun subjects are going to come into play as we continue to have these conversations.
I think it's really fascinating because it's all very interconnected, isn't it? And it's one very concrete way, I think, to explain it would be how people are doing personal transformations, like with healing. They talk about like post-traumatic stress syndrome and things like that. And they talk about owning your narrative and things like that. All of that is kind of code for how you take back your personal journey and collective journey. And it impacts the collective journey when you heal that part of yourself. And I don't want to get too out there, too woo-woo with the audience if they don't want to go down this journey with me. But what I'm trying to say,
we're talking about ETs. There is no such thing as
but what I'm trying to say is that actually, for instance, one of the thoughts that came to my mind was about Florida, where Reef is actually living right now. The water is 101 degrees, the seawater, for the first time. And that's having an impact on the ecological structure. So, and we're close to World War III. And I'm wondering if this convergence of potential disasters is sort of jump-starting our collective need to pull back our narrative and heal the planet and do some other choices. I don't know. Am I getting too far out there? What do you think?
No. That's a big part of what, in my interviews, what's being talked about. So, over time here, we've lost our connection to our mother Gaia. She is our life support system. We are traveling in space on this giant spaceship, spaceship Earth. And the more we're seeing these anomalies, and a lot of people, want to say climate change or too much carbon in the air or whatever. But I believe it's because humanity is just losing its connection to the forces, this great force of Mother Nature. And it's sort of screaming at us, hey guys, pay attention here. And this doesn't mean, we need better ESG scores and, climate or carbon credits. This is about reconnecting to Earth and our food. That's another big subject that comes up a lot, is, the poisoning of the environment with our food sources.
And can I stop you right there just one
Sure.
second, because it's so fascinating, and I think you'd be interested in this. One of the first things I noticed in Moscow, Russia, was the food tasted different. And so I started looking into that. And Vladimir Putin had been observing the United States and how much illness there is. And some countries in Europe have been observing that as well, how much chronic illness we have. And linking it to Monsanto, companies like Monsanto and other pesticides. So he's outlawed Monsanto. It is not allowed. And then what he did, besides outlawing it, very strictly, people they go to jail if they try to poison or use fertilizers, bioengineer things, none of that is allowed. And he then gave monetary incentives to farmers that would just use organic. And so you'll notice people are very fit here, very healthy. There's a lot of, there just is, it's a pretty healthy decide. Some people make choices, people make choices to drink alcohol and do other things. And that's, that happens in a lot of cultures around the world. But what I'm saying is, as a whole, there's a real paying attention to not poisoning the soil and not using pesticides. And then in his, we just had in St. Petersburg, Russia, the Africa-Russia conference, they announced that they're helping Africa, forgiving debt, and they're giving wheat away to more impoverished nations, but they're also giving incentives for not using Monsanto. Again, Monsanto is being blocked. So
Awesome.
You see a big push from the West, because what's happened in Ukraine, Monsanto and DuPont bought up a bunch of hexagrams, millions of hexagrams of Ukraine. Zelensky sold in Ukraine. So it now belongs to Monsanto and Bill Gates and some of the pesticide companies and DuPont. And DuPont, as you know, backs Biden. They, when I was working for him, that's who kept him in office. And they're very big into pharmaceuticals as well as fertilizers and other kinds of chemicals and pesticides. So I just wanted to throw that in there because it's interesting. China, I don't know where they're at, but that's where I'm at here. That's what's happening.
Yeah. I've been paying attention to that over the years. I know that's been one of the major shifts. Europe too has banned much of the GMOs and poisons that continue to plague Americans and our American soil. So, this disconnection from our food and from our from our mother Gaia is creating a sickness both in us as in our individual health, in our collective health, and in our environmental health. The planet is screaming in that sense, and it's showing up in many ways. And I think as we reconnect to our earth and to our food and to our each other, just look at the whole COVID psyop craziness that's went through, separating families and just making a mess of our human connections. So as we reconnect, as we recognize these agendas and call them out and sort of move away from what's not working. Clearly it's not working. We've been there, we've done that. So now it's time for us to reconnect. And as we do, I think many of our issues will be mitigated. And also as we make this connection, then we can introduce these technologies in a safe way to these sort of out there extraordinary ET technologies, 0 point energy type ideas can be introduced to help us thrive and become, better human beings with our families and our communities.
Let's hope. Yes.
Yeah.
And so what projects are you working on now? Like what's your, because you are a director and a producer and you always have a lot going on. So can you tell the audience where they can find your work and find out more about you and what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm doing for about a year now. I've been doing. I have a membership website that I do weekly interviews where I sort of I'm calling Interview with Ed 2.0. So I take my show is 3 seasons. I've got 1 more episode or 2 more episodes to put out for season 3, and then I'll be done with sort of putting a period on that one for now. And then I've really been focusing on my membership portal where we do live chats in real time. I've realized that things are happening so fast and developing so quickly, just to have the up-to-date conversation about these types of subjects and downloads. So many members in our group are super tapped in and getting guidance from our ET families on how to navigate and do things in a more connected way, as we were talking, with better food and better living conditions and introducing new technologies, these types of things. So that's super exciting for me. I'm doing that on a weekly basis. I still have some other projects I'm dabbling with behind the scenes with on the film stuff, but the conversation, I think, is the most important thing right now. Just having these types of conversations and getting people excited for what's to come, and that we're not as crazy and doom and gloom as it seems. We're just going through a collective purge.
There you have it. There you have it. That's a good way to put it. I like that analogy. Reef, do you have any final questions or comments for Reuben? Okay, that's great. And so I just wanted to say we went a little longer than we normally do, but I always am so fascinated to hear what you have to say. And this was such a pivotal moment in history to have these hearings. And of course, I thought of you and your citizen hearing when I saw the live hearings. I immediately thought of you and how that must have felt to see that. I just hope that more becomes public instead of sort of shrouded and veiled, because that's annoying to people. I think people just want to know the truth.
Well, luckily we have platforms like yours and Twitter and other people that are now no longer censoring like crazy. Like obviously it's still going on, but the conversation is getting out there, and where people are waking up. People are seeing the shenanigans that have been going on, and if we tried to have this conversation just 2 years ago, there were hardly any platforms that could have it. So appreciate all your work and appreciate you, powering through these difficult times and spreading your messages too. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And my best to you. Your wife is a wonderful artist. For people that want to follow you, they can find her as well and follow and support her art. We need to support our artists who bring beauty and grace to our lives, right?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes. And and I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Reuben, you are amazing. We'll be talking offline soon. I'm going to be trying to come to one of your chats. So check out Reuben. Reef, if you don't mind putting it up one more time. This is his membership portal. You can literally go into a portal with him and be with him. And who knows where that portal will take you. You might go some really fun, interesting places. And also, definitely. And you can watch his interviews online. So thanks everyone for joining. Next week, we'll have Chris Ems and we'll have another conversation about hopefully moving towards peace and ways we can move humanity towards peace instead of the direction that some of our leaders seem to be trying to take us. Thanks everyone. For me, it's much later. It's close to midnight. So I'll be signing off and going to sleep, but I know many of you still have half your day left. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time. Take care.